Hey, it's 10:10. Let's officially start.
Okay.
You on? Oh, I should turn mine on too. Yes.
I think I'm on.
Turn our mics on so that we can be heard. Good? Because nobody had any idea what we were saying before. Right? Welcome to Adult Forum today. This is my good friend Terence Harrison, Sergeant First Class. First Class.
Yeah. No, you're fine.
Sergeant First Class Terence Harrison in the U.S. Army Reserves, and Director of the Veterans Office at UC. We met a number of years ago when I was doing what I call rounds, so essentially wandering around randomly and sticking my head into offices and going, "Hi, what are you guys doing?" And the staff in the Veterans Office were like,
No.
"You're all right. We're good. Doing some paperwork. You want to talk to Terence?" So I went and hung out with Terence, and I haven't been over to the office in a little while.
You're neglecting us.
I am. COVID has done a number on a lot of things, but they do some really great work over there in the office, and so I invited him to come and chat about his experience of his faith, his experience of the presence of God within an academic setting, and also within his Army Reserves experience. So do you want to just give us a quick little rundown of who you are?
Yeah, thank you.
Why we should care?
So, like Pastor Alice said, my name's Terence Harrison, lifelong Cincinnatian, grew up in the Forest Park area. Joined Army Reserves on January 21st, 1989, and I'm still in, believe it or not, so it's been 33 good years. My body tells me, when are you going to retire? And so I'm having too much fun. My reserve unit's in Columbus, Ohio, so I'm on the road quite a bit. Also, like she said, I am the program manager at the Office of Veterans Programs and Services at the University of Cincinnati as well. I've been doing that for about 7 years, going on 8 years, and then also in the city of Forest Park, I'm on the city council, so I'm an elected official as well. So I've got my hats and many rings. So, yes.
I love that. So when we met, you must have been fairly new when we met.
At UC, yeah, it was like within my first year, so we're going about 7.5 years.
That's great. Okay, cool. Very good. I don't think I knew the previous person, so yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Jake. You didn't know
and I didn't realize you were on city council either, which is just fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just got elected.
So fancy. Yeah, I love it. We're in the presence of elected officials, so everybody be on your best behavior.
No, don't, please.
Or not. Tell him, what you really think if you live in Forest Park. So hilariously, during COVID, this isn't hilarious, it's to me. I had this idea that I was going to do, because, of course, everybody was separate and had to be sort of indoors and such. I had this idea to do an online red couch thing. Terence is the only person I interviewed on the red couch for that.
Really?
Because we realized it became very difficult and we had other things we had to do. So somewhere floating around, there is a video of us recording in Burnett Woods. We took the couch out into the woods and sat in the woods and talked about his life. It was great. So we're sort of rehashing right now. So Terence, tell us, or tell me, whoever, what's the faith tradition that you grew up in? And then sort of as a follow-up to that, like what is important to you about that faith now? Like, what have you brought with you from that?
Okay, thank you. So, I grew up in a Pentecostal church. My mom didn't go to church. She grew up in her church down in Kentucky. But my dad would drag me and my sister to church. It was Zion Temple First Pentecostal Church, which is in Avondale. So we'd go there, and then when I turned 18, it'd be like, okay, I'm not going. I want to do what I want to do and whatnot. So from age like 18 to about 28, 29 years old, I was doing everything I wanted to do. And, you talk about burning the candle at both ends and just really living wild and doing whatever you want to do. I did that. However, I felt empty inside. So, me being the guy that I am and my current wife, but we were dating at the time, she said she started going to church, and it's like, you know what? She kept bugging me, saying, "You gotta go to church. You gotta go to church." You know what, it's fine. I'm going to go to church just to shut you up because you keep bugging me about this church thing.
Like the widow and the unjust judge.
Yeah, so it's okay, fine, I'll go. And I went, and it really opened my eyes. It's like, this is what I've been missing. This was in 2000, February 19th, 2000, I'll never forget that day. And I started going back. And this is Solid Rock Church, which if you go up 75, this is the church with the large Jesus statue in Monroe, Ohio. And I went there, and it really filled that void I was missing when I was out there doing what I wanted to do, kind of like the prodigal. And with that, I got involved in ministry, prison ministry. In fact, I've been involved in prison ministry for over 20 years. Now, like you said, COVID kind of put a damper on things where we're not able to go into the jails and the prisons anymore. But it really helped me get on the track that brings us here today. Because if I didn't do prison ministry, I wouldn't have left my previous job, took the leap of faith, go back to school, ended up at UC, and we would have never met. So.
Right. Wow. What was it? I didn't realize that you did prison ministry before. That's awesome. Where was that in the penitentiary that's outside of Lebanon?
All over the state of Ohio.
It's all over.
So I can like Lebanon, Warren, Allen, Lucasville. I mean, all over the state of Ohio. Even a couple federal penitentiaries. So down in Louisiana, Oakdale, Alderston, West Virginia. With women's prison. But for me, every week I would go into a juvenile prison. So the Butler County Juvenile Facility, or 2020 down on Auburn Avenue in Cincinnati. So really just going there, and I have to tell people, it's like, look, I'm not having a bad day, because if you go to places like that, you see how people are, confined in a space no larger than your bathroom. For some of them, they're never getting out. I mean, they have to do something to get there. I get that. But at the same time, they can be redeemed too, right? So just for somebody to take the time and go to minister to them, just like Christ ministered to us, it really humbles you, but at the same time, it brings some satisfaction, because you can see lives changed. And if it wasn't for the grace of God, that could have been me on the other side of those bars, being ministered to.
What was it that sparked the shift away from that and into, as you said, going back to school?
So, going back to school, so when I was younger, so I was about 20 years old, I was on a scholarship at Northern Kentucky University, and this was with ROTC, and I lost a scholarship, right? I got a letter in the mail saying, hey, your bill's due, and then I didn't have any money, and I called the school, and they said, like, yeah, we didn't renew your scholarship. So I got a job. I got a job at the Ford Motor Company in Sharonville, up there on the corner of Sharon and Mosteller, and worked at the transmission factory for about 15 years. And then it was about 2005, 2006, they were having a round of buyouts. And one of the buyouts was like, okay, if you want to go back to school, we'll pay for you. You can go back to school for 4 years. We'll pay for $15,000 towards your tuition each year, keep all your benefits, and we'll pay half your salary while you're in school. And I went back to NKU just to check, and it's like, yeah, you're still in good standing. So it's okay, well, take that leap of faith and go back to school, because once again, as believers, we're called to have that measure of faith. And I said, okay, I'm gonna put my faith on the table, just to walk away through something that's guaranteed to walk up to the great unknown. And I don't know where God's gonna take me. And that's how it ended up in higher education.
Yeah, I love that. So you're working in an institution that is, to me anyway, famously secular, because I work in the church. I work at a university that mostly welcomes us individually when we come on and kind of meet people or whatever, but on the whole, not super thrilled about religious folk being about. Excuse me. So what is your experience as a person of faith? Like, how do you live your faith on sort of a day-to-day basis in a very secular institution? What does that look like?
Really, you try to treat everybody with love and compassion. That's how I go about. Because sometimes we do get individuals under the guise of the church, right? They say some really hateful things to individuals, right? And the biggest thing is like those same individuals that are being beat on or belittled or told about or just being judged. I have to show love to those individuals. And, so, hey, my office is open to you, even if you're not a veteran. Like, if you just need a place to talk or just to vent or something like that, please, my office is always open. And just really treat everybody with respect and just love on them. Because at the same time, for those same individuals, what is their home life like, right? I mean, are their mom and their dad treating them just as bad as some of these other individuals, and just the only place they can feel some sort of comfort is at school? And I don't want to be part of the problem. I want to be a part of the solution.
Yeah. Do you have stories or moments where you can see God kind of acting in the work that you do in the Veterans Office, or you can see it in your coworkers or?
Well, I'll tell you, one time we had the interfaith breakfast. Remember that at the Jewish house? And I took a peek inside their sanctuary, and I felt the presence of God there. I really felt it, where I was about to just get on my face and just start praying. And I always wanted to just go back and just see that, because it's just one of the few places, right? Just like, okay, you don't see it on the campus every day. You see a lot of other things. But I really, truly felt the presence of God in that place and in that sanctuary.
Yeah. That's the Hillel Jewish Student Organization. They have a house on the same street that the Edge House is, but a little closer to campus.
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, I have felt that in sort of your welcome, like your personal welcome, but also like when I have been either in the office, the Veterans Office, or there's a lounge that's in the Student Center. When I have visited those places, like the welcome that's offered there has been really lovely. There's always, like when I show up in the collar, there's always a little, yes. Sometimes it's like, yeah, but like, and it's not necessarily rude or anything, and I don't mean like just anywhere in the university. You show up in the collar and they're like, what's up? But there was a pretty much immediate, like, yeah, cool, like, what's your deal? What are you up to? Like, come back to this thing, come do that thing. Like, it's just always been very welcoming in that space. And I think that's at least partly down to you and your gregariousness.
Well, I know what you bring to the table, so you're always welcome.
Well,
so
now you do.
Yeah, so.
People don't always, yeah, anyway. So you have been in the reserves, you said, for like since 2000, is that right? No,
1989.
Golly, 2000 was something different. 1989. Yeah. That's, okay, let's do some math.
Yeah, 33 years.
33 years.
Yes.
It's an auspicious date for Jesus' life, 33 years. When he died and was resurrected. Anyway, that's a long time, man.
It is.
Yeah. How have you seen it change?
Oh boy, yeah. So, geez. When I came in, we saw a lot of Vietnam guys still hanging around. So anytime, anybody here a veteran? And just thank y'all for your service. I really appreciate that for what you did for us. Anytime I see a Vietnam veteran, I go out of my way to thank them, because those are the ones who broke me into the Army Reserves. Because you think about 1989, for some that was 20 years or less. But they always joke with them. So y'all taught me those bad habits that I still hold today. So when I see some young soldiers, I really can't get mad at them. But for the changes, there have been a lot of changes in the military since then. One, you're starting to see more women in roles just reserved for men. And that's within the last 5-10 years, right? So when I joined, a lot of women, they helped with nursing or clerks or something like that, but something where you didn't do a lot of fighting. But now, starting in the 90s, you had more women get into aviation, right? And then, 6-7 years ago, you're getting women into Army Ranger School. Now they're serving in the infantry, driving tanks and field artillery batteries and whatnot. So that's the biggest change I've seen over that too. Also with the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That was about 11 years ago, where gay people can serve in the military without being discharged based on their sexuality. That's another big change. So those are two of the biggest changes I've seen in the military. Now, since the wars have dwindled in Iraq and Afghanistan, you're not seeing as many people wanting to join or enroll or whatnot. But on the academic side, with the post 9/11 GI Bill, a lot of our soldiers or their families can go to school, and the schools, they'll have to pay a dime, right? And they're also getting a housing allowance while they're in school. So that's a really big change on the educational side.
And in that 33 years, I'm aware, of course, like the sort of obvious level of sort of the presence of God within the military is we have a lot of chaplains of various faiths. One of our former pastors here was an Army chaplain. Okay, great. Make sure I get that right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so like obviously we're familiar with that. What is your experience? I mean, that's sort of like, that's really, I don't want to minimize that, right? That's really good stuff, but like not just in the sort of obvious, there's people who are paid to show God. Are there ways that you have seen God kind of working, or God's presence, as you've been going to, your weekends? That sounds like when you go hang out with the reserve. That sounds casual too. I don't have the right language.
No, you're fine.
When you go to do your service with the reserves, whatever work that is, how are you seeing God present in the relationship?
We do have chaplains, and you have righteous men and women of God. If there's not a chaplain in the house, they'll have chapel service, right? So you do have those opportunities to worship in the faith tradition that you hold dear to you. Now overseas, when I was in Iraq, we did have really good chaplain services where you had men and women, all believers, just go and just to have that peace, because you're right in the middle of a war zone and you just needed something to remind you of home, or just to get away from the day-to-day stressors of being in a war zone. One of my favorite chapel services we had at our base in northern Iraq, we had contractors. They were all from Uganda, the country of Uganda in Eastern Africa, and they guarded the base basically, right? So we went to their compound and went to one of their church services, and that was the time. That was a good time. It's like, if you've never been to an African worship service, you need to treat yourself to one. Yeah, because it was nice. It just felt like home, and they were just so welcoming and whatnot. Our cooks, we had cooks, they were from Sri Lanka. And I was fortunate, my commander, he was a man of God. And we would go and have worship service with the Sri Lankans. So really, you can just see how the presence of God is just a global thing. A lot of times we just keep it local. But just to see like how God is moving in other countries and how we're all together in the Middle East just worshiping the same God, it was wonderful.
You've used that phrase a couple of times, man of God. What does that mean to you?
So, I mean, I know he did some ministry work, but you can tell that he lived the Bible. That we go to prayer service. You'd have Bible studies. We just talk about God, and he's doing well. I mean, my former commander, but you can just tell like he really wore his faith on his sleeve, right? So he was a true man of God. And I love that man.
Do you feel you're a man of God?
Sometimes, it depends on who you ask. But if you would have told me, I'm going to say back in the mid-90s, that I would be in a church, I'd look at you like you're crazy. And you'd be involved in ministry. I'd think, yeah, you're smoking something. But at the same time, I know what going to church with my father, like I said earlier, what was instilled in me. And it's like everybody's building their testimony somehow, some way, right? And my journey is not everybody else's journey, right? I mean, some people they're righteous people, things like that. They have a story that you might sound benign, something like that. Me, I was a little rough around the edges. My former ministry head in the prison ministry, he was a straight up criminal. He started from the age of 8 I mean, he was in all kind of trouble and whatnot, but he found God in prison. And he was going back in the same prisons and ministering. I mean, and he was somebody I looked up to. So just to have that type of teaching and to see that, hey, where I was at is not where I became or where I was going to. It's just really just a part of my faith story, my journey. So, so I'm a man of God and I'm a man of God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you? How do I ask that question? My family has a motto. I'm not even sure motto is the right word, but we have a phrase that we say to each other regularly, which is kind, courageous, beloved. When I was still driving my kids to school every day, I would say it to them as I got out of the car every morning. Now they go to school different ways, so it doesn't quite work the same. But it's a reminder of who they are already, and of how we as a family kind of try to exist in the world, right? So you're already kind, you're already people of courage, and you're already so beloved. And then how can you then remind yourself of that and live that way during the day? Like when you notice yourself being frightened, or you notice yourself beating up on yourself or whatever, can you remind yourself of that? And can you remember that everybody else is like that? Kind, courageous, beloved. That's a Connor thing. Do you have anything like that in your family that is sort of whether it's a phrase or it's just kind of an experience that is like, this is who we are as the Harrisons, or this is who you are as Terence?
I have to speak for self on that one, because I'm trying to be that example to my family. And sometimes you have to remind yourself, you have to encourage yourself that, like, when life gets you down and whatnot, like, who do you belong to, right? Sometimes I have to tell myself, so, like, I am a child of God, or I'm a king's kid or something like that, just to motivate yourself. Or you look back, like for those of us who served or anything like that, you look at your life journey and it's like, I got through this battle, I got through this situation and whatnot, so whatever comes next, I'll be able to get through that, right? So I have to remind myself, like, you know what, I've been to war. And then whatever I'm dealing with at work or at home, so I can get over that, right? For those who don't know, I lost 2 children. And so then that really plays in the role too, because I can say, okay, I'm not at children's hospital, right? So like when I did the job interview at UC, people were saying, well, you're just too cool. And I said, look, I'm not across the street at children's hospital watching a sick kid. I'm not in the middle of some dusty fob in northern Iraq worrying about indirect fire or sitting baking in 150-degree heat. It's a job interview. That's just the way I have to look at it. And it's not that bad. If I didn't get it, I didn't get it. So what? It's like, look, it's like worse things can and have happened. So I just remind myself of the journey that got me to this date on the 23rd of October.
Yeah, there's a path behind you, and there's still a path in front of you.
Correct.
Yeah, I like that, what you just said. Who do you belong to?
Yeah, I mean, we're called, right?
Yeah.
We're called for a time such as this, and I just count myself fortunate, like I said, because it could have gone 10 different ways, right? When you look at the newspaper or, looking on the news or something like that, you see somebody that lost their life in an auto accident. I said, that could have been me, but it wasn't me, or indirect gunfire or something like that. It's just like all these things that could have happened didn't happen. So I'm just thankful that we're able to share this time, right? Just to be able to talk amongst friends and so like, hey, there is a God that looks high and sits high, looks low, and has our best interests for us.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. That's calling to mind for me, Terence. Something from one of my favorite books, which is called The Sparrow. It's a science fiction novel. Highly recommended. Also, if you do choose to read it, I'm so sorry in advance. It's very heavy. And I won't give you the details of why this particular thing comes up, but some difficult things happen. And the people in the room they're all Jesuit priests, which is interesting. And one of them is trying to make sense of these difficult things. He says, God's eye is on the sparrow, which we all love, right? And the other guy says, and the sparrow still falls. If you ever read the book, you'll get to that part and you go, oh! It's a sucker punch. It strikes me because I remember you telling me on the couch in the woods, the story of your two children and their deaths, and that was a sucker punch for me. I had no idea, and how painful that was for you. How did that? You're welcome if you want to. You don't have to speak about that because I know it's still painful. But that idea, like as you say, God is looking at us, right? God's eye is on us. God's eye is on the sparrow, and the sparrow still falls. Yeah. How does that resonate with you?
Well, the thing is, if I didn't have God, we wouldn't have this conversation because I'd be in a corner somewhere just mad at the world. And really, I think I was being prepared for that. Because a lot of times in our faith journey, I don't think it's about us, it's about somebody who needs us. Somebody needs to see us. Like, how were you able to overcome that? How were you able to, get through that obstacle? And in turn, this one, like I said, once again, kind of moved me to take that leap of faith and leave my job that I've been comfortable in and whatnot, and just say, like, you know what, if God got me through the destitute children, He can get me through school. He can get me through school without, any debt going forward, and get me into another job, and can put me in places that I never had access to before. And really, what it did for some people looked at me and said, like, that's how they envisioned a man of faith, right? Because like 2 weeks after the fact, I was back at work, and they said, "What are you doing here?" I said, I got to work. And so, how come you're not somewhere? It's like, look, God got this. I don't question the why or whatnot. It just happened, right? Because there's no guarantee that we're going to grow old and die, right? Everybody has an appointed time, right? The Bible says the appointed man wants to die after the judgment. So that was just their time. And that little time that we had, we made the most of everything. But that kind of guides me, like I said, because that tempered me. And just like, okay, that's the worst thing that can happen to anybody, if you ask me. Now, some might disagree, but in my life, that's pretty bad. But I got through that. I got through some other things and whatnot because I put my trust in God, right? The Bible says that. The Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all things shall be added unto you. So if I'm putting Him first in everything, no matter what comes, He's still taking care of, taking care of everything for us.
Preach. Wow, thank you, Terence. We have a little bit of time left, and it occurs to me that perhaps y'all have some thoughts. Like, a lot of stuff has come up in this moment. Or maybe just knowing that Terence is going to be here and with his position at UC and stuff, is some things were occurring to you. So I would like to just offer, I realize that it's a sure way to make the room go silent, but anybody have any questions?
What was your education? What did you go back to school for?
So I got my degrees in criminal justice. Of course, the average student takes they choose about 5 different majors. So my first major was radio, TV, and film. Then it was social work, and then I didn't know what I wanted to do. But when I went back, criminal justice, because of what I did in the prison ministry. Prison ministry kind of like opened my eyes to things. That's why I kind of know these things. And then when I spoke to some of my professors at NKU, I told them about my background, and I told them the places I've been, and they were just kind of, I was like, really? So yeah, so I've been to this prison, that prison, and whatnot, and just have a different lens than they had from academia. So I have both a bachelor's and master's in criminal justice from NKU and UC. Thank you.
Yeah, who else?
So at UC, you work at UC?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you give us an idea of where you are on that campus?
Okay, are you familiar with the campus?
Yes.
Okay, so University Pavilion. So that building's between Tangeman and McMicken, right behind
Yes.
Van Warner. So if you're off the Clifton Avenue side, if you turn into that little traffic circle off of Clifton, at the end of the fountain, that's where University Pavilion is. So come see me.
Okay.
It's the building where the president of the university has his office and the board and everybody meet up there, yeah. But he's like almost in the basement.
Yeah, second floor.
Not quite the basement.
Not there. Pretty close though.
I also wandered into the is testing services in the basement there?
No, they moved across campus to
But
French
they
Hall.
were though.
They were.
Yeah, okay, so I stopped in there at one point. Nothing came of that.
Yeah.
It's not always so successful. Yeah, what else?
I was just wondering what the veteran population is among the
Good question.
student body.
Oh Lord. So our numbers, I know I had to run the numbers for the VA. So last academic year we were at like 1,623 out of 46,000. So
Yeah.
that's pretty big for. So in the state of Ohio, the two largest student veteran populations is you see in Ohio State. And our numbers fluctuate, so like one year we might be on top, another year might be Ohio State. But yeah, so like all the other schools in the area, their numbers average about 600, depending on the school. Some a little more, some less. But that's still about 2% of the student population are veterans. And that kind of reflects in society, 2% of Americans served in uniform. Right?
How would you judge our criminal system today compared to, say, 25, 30 years ago?
Yeah, the criminal justice system today. Changes need to be made because so back in the early to mid 90s, we were in a rush to lock everybody up with the 3 strikes. Because, you get some news stories and you highlight the fact, well, this person was a 3-time felon and we need to lock them up for life. Okay, they were a 3-time felon, but what kind of felonies were these, right? We're thinking that these are rapists or murderers, or they might have robbed a video store or something like that. They stole something that was under $25. Right, so we really have to have smart criminal justice reform, and I'm saying this as a politician. It's like, why are we so quick to lock everybody up?
Your battery just died.
My battery just died?
Yeah,
Okay,
there you
I
go.
can speak louder if I need to. But we have to be smart about these things, right? Because as a society, I mean, if you think about how much resources we're putting in to lock some people up forever, I mean, we're spending a lot of money. Now, some people need to be kept away. Don't get me wrong. Some people do need this, like, yeah, you need to go. But I think we just don't be so quick to warehouse everybody, because one day they're going to get out. And then if they're not being taught any social skills or how to assimilate or reassimilate back into society, guess what? We're going to do the same thing again. And it's just a vicious cycle. Okay, so I think for every individual, we just need to take the time and just like, okay, don't be so quick to incarcerate.
Yeah, I've thought for a long time. I've known a number of people in the prison system or within the justice system who, yeah, it's not rehabilitative.
No.
It's all about punishment.
Yep. We want to find
and I get that. Man, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
You hurt me. I want you to be punished for it. But like also, is that really what we need to be doing? Is that the most helpful thing? Is that the most Christian thing?
Because think about it too. What if that's your child? We sometimes throw that,
right?
And that's certain crimes. Now it's all crimes. Sure. Let's just get that out there. So I'm not saying all things, but I mean just some things. If we're so quick to judge, so quick to lock them up, just remember that could be your child in that person's shoes.
That brings us.
Were you
What
only,
would you do, sorry,
no, go right ahead. I spoke already. Go ahead.
if you could go back, say 10, 15, 20 years, what would you do different?
Honestly, if I were to go back years, like 20, 30 years, I know some decisions I made because that's the beauty about getting older. You know, you start to reflect more and you think before you speak. You think before you do, because how is this going to impact people, right? So when I was at my worst, I hurt a lot of people. I admit that. But then when I reconciled with the Lord, then He allowed me to go back to people and ask for forgiveness for things I did when I was younger. So just like treating people in a way that's not kind, things like that, or saying things. Who knows? Maybe I would have stayed at my previous job. I don't know. But those are some things that I have regrets about. But at the end of the day, my story's still being written. And who knows, if I would have just stayed on that same path or the same course, of course we wouldn't be here today. I know that much. Or would I be here, period? Right? I mean, I might not still be on this earth.
Were you only deployed once?
Yeah, that's enough. But yes. I mean, back in the 90s, I didn't call it deployment, but I did go to Germany for almost a year back in the 90s, deployment. That was more like a vacation, if you ask me. I mean, it's like, they bused us to and from the hospital each day. Then I'd end up buying a little car just to drive back and forth to the hospital. But yeah, it was once is enough. I mean, I was gone for a year. I left in November of 2010, came back in November 2011. When I deployed, my son was 6 months old when I deployed to Iraq. So it was tough, leaving him and coming back. It took a while for him to warm up to me, right? Because, I mean, all he knew was his mom and his sister, right? And he wasn't crawling or anything when I left. When I came back, he was running and all that. So it took some time just to really get to know each other. During that same time, I lost my father. He had cancer and he passed away when I was gone. I was able to come back for the service for that. So, yeah, being away, it depends. And for those of you in the audience who served, I mean, it's tough. It's really tough. Thankfully we had technology where I could call home through a modem on my computer, just like I'm sitting here. I just pick up the phone and say, hey, how you doing? Or FaceTime or Skype or something like that. Some of my soldiers, they came back, they weren't married anymore, right? Like their spouses left them. So it's very interesting, to say the least, but I wouldn't have traded that experience for anything.
Yeah, see, now I have a question, and we're getting close to the end of our time because I'm going to have to go to service. So we very don't have time to answer this. How would you change how maybe the reserves, the Army, or maybe the military as a whole helps prepare? I was going to say soldiers. I realize that's the Army term, but I'm going to use it in a generic term. Sorry. How would you change how we help soldiers return to their lives afterwards?
Oh boy. Yeah,
that's a huge question.
That's a lot. Well, once again, everybody's experiences aren't the same. For some, if they deploy to us, you got to ask, where are you deploying to, right? So I'm deploying to Cuba. That's okay. In my mind, that's not too bad because you're on an American base in Cuba, and you get a chance to go snorkeling, and there's McDonald's there, and you're just away from your family. Now, for those who might be, let's say, in Syria. Okay, let's just say, okay, we got soldiers in Syria. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. We don't know what they've gone through. I know, like, for some of us who came back from Iraq and Afghanistan, seeing people blown up or shot or something like that, are you taking care of your mental health? That's a big thing. Are you seeking to help? Because as service members, while we're in uniform, you're told, like, hey, suck it up. Suck it up. You don't, if you twist your ankle or something like that, well, just shake it off. But as you get older, those things start to creep up on you, and you're trying to get compensation from the VA, and you can't because you don't have anything documented because you were told to suck it up. For mental health, you know, there's still that stigma that if you're seeking mental health treatment, then you're you're a defect, you're deficient. We got to break that stigma too, because things have happened, and if it goes untreated, then bad things can happen.
Is the statistic still real? Is the 22?
Yeah. Interesting about that. So there's a stat out there. It's like 22 veterans a day commit suicide. However, a lot of those veterans are older than 60, 65 years old. So a lot of the ones who are committing suicide might be your Vietnam era, Korean War, Cold War era veterans who are doing that. Not so many of the younger, right. So that's really interesting.
Doesn't necessarily make it better, but it's good information for the statistic.
Right, because sometimes when you see poor veterans out there on the streets and whatnot, you hear thank you for your service while you're serving. And then once you put on the cap and you go to your VFW or American Legion Hall, you don't get as many accolades or things like that. You're kind of discarded off to the side. So we can do a little bit better. There are resources out there that all veterans should take advantage of. There's some things that as veterans we may or may not know of, but it's just really getting plugged in with your County Service Veterans Commission, the VA, different veterans champions out there, and talk to your local elected officials about these things and make sure you get their ear.
That's a big question. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
Right at the end, let's talk about that. Well, I do have to run and get ready for the other service, so I would like to say thank you so much, Terence, for being here with us
Appreciate
and
it.
sharing your.